So I want to ask Dhammika out there and over Zoom. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, how about like during the day, was the sound okay and everything? You could all hear well enough?
Yes.
Yes, Bhante, it was perfect.
Okay.
And today your Dhamma talk was excellent. QnA, my wife, she's make a huge, a lot of records, a lot of quotations. It's like a beautiful article. Like it's a no, really. It contains of aphorisms. Especially, I enjoy your. This life is a sexually transmitted disease, which always ends fatal. That's kind of very, very nice way to put
Well,
it.
I heard that from somewhere else.
No, that's
my original words.
It's very, very cool. It's very accurate and funny.
Well, we should be able to joke and laugh a little bit of our life, even of our mistakes, or even about the bad things that happen, because it's just it's life, and
Exactly.
and there's no use in crying about it. That makes it worse.
Yeah, laughing at yourself, it's actually very good, to have self-criticism and being able to laugh at yourself and your mistakes. It's great. It's a very good quality.
I'm glad you're able to join this Zoom program.
Oh, I enjoy it immensely. And we just talked with my wife. We just talked about coming to your place sometime, maybe in the spring, because you already booked on New Year. So maybe sometime in the spring, maybe like on self-retreat.
Oh yeah, I'll be away until March 1st, but after March 1st, and then we'll probably have some retreat here during the springtime and summertime too.
Great.
So
What?
He's leaving after May 1st.
No. He'll be gone till March.
That's what would be good, yeah. When it's
After
warm,
March.
so you can come up.
I'll be gone from February 8th until March 1st.
Okay, we can come after March 1st, maybe on weekend, and maybe just a few days. We love your place. We look at your pictures on your website, on your blog. It's so beautiful, and now you just renovated all these barns. That nice cooties.
Yeah, we have a few individual self-retreat rooms now that are quite nice.
Beautiful, so and excellent. So nice, neat, growing place. So we just excited. We just look at it. It's 3 hours from Richmond to on I-95. It's 3 hours to a place. So,
oh, you're in Richmond. For some reason, I thought you were in Canada. I guess that was just a.
No. You see my at RVA. They call it Richmond, Virginia.
I didn't notice that.
It's a very common. I don't know. They just no. We live in Richmond.
Okay.
So
yeah, there's another guy from Richmond here right now, actually.
You mentioned him. I forgot his name, and I don't know him. I think, but I am on meditation timer, and I have a lot of people connected, local people from Richmond and around.
Okay, so we're going to get ready for the puja. Does everyone have the puja chanting there? Okay, friends, our friends who are online, welcome back for this evening's program, probably the final evening program for this retreat. So we're going to do the puja now. And if you all have the chanting pages, you can follow that or just listen. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato Samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranang gacchami. Dhammang saranang gacchami. Sanghang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. And the 8 precepts. I undertake the precept to abstain from killing. I undertake the training rule to abstain from stealing. I abstain the training rule to abstain from sensual misconduct. I undertake the training rule to abstain from false speech. I undertake the training rule to abstain from malicious speech. I undertake the training rule to abstain from harsh speech. I undertake the training rule to abstain from speech. I undertake the training rule to abstain from wrong livelihood and from intoxicating drinks and drugs causing heedlessness. Such indeed is the Buddha, worthy, perfectly enlightened, perfect in true knowledge and conduct, well gone, knower of the worlds, supreme trainer of persons to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, enlightened and exalted. Well expounded is the Dhamma by the Buddha, directly visible, unaffected by time, calling one to come and see, leading onwards to be realized by the wise. The order of the Buddha's disciples is practicing well. They are of upright conduct. They have entered the right path. They are practicing correctly. That is, the 4 pairs of persons, the 8 kinds of individuals. This order of the Buddha's disciples is worthy of offerings and hospitality, worthy of gifts and salutations, supreme field of merits for the world. With candle lights dispelling dark, I respect the perfect Buddha, the light of the triple worlds, who dispels the darkness of delusion. With these flowers I respect the Buddha. By this merit may I gain liberation. As these flowers fade and wither, so will this body decay and die. All actions are led by the mind. Mind is their master. Mind is their maker. Act or speak with an impure mind, then suffering follows, as the cartwheel follows the foot of the ox. And in the same way, if one acts or speaks with a pure mind, then happiness follows, as your shadow follows you around. If due to negligence I have done some wrong, by body, speech, or mind, Forgive me of that offense, O Bhante, perfect one of vast wisdom. Forgive me of that offense, O Dhamma, visible and unaffected by time. Forgive me of that offense, O Sangha, practicing well and supreme. I have gained a vast mass of merit, respecting the honorable triple gem. By the spiritual power of that merit, may my obstacles be destroyed. By means of these meritorious deeds, may I never join with the foolish. May I always join with the wise until the time I attain Nibbana. May the suffering be free from suffering. May the fear-struck be free from fear. May the grieving be free from grief. So too may all beings live. Okay, now we're going to go over to recite the Maha Mangala Sutta, the great discourse on the blessings. And so these blessings are basically how a lay person or anybody, but especially lay people, should live their life to gain all the good fortune and blessings in life and progress on the path of Dhamma. So starts out, many deities were asking the Buddha what are blessings, desiring their well-being. So the Buddha replies to them, to associate not with the foolish, to be with the wise, to honor the worthy ones. This is a blessing supreme. To reside in a suitable location, having done good deeds in the past, to set oneself in the right direction. This is a blessing supreme. Great learning and skilled in a craft, well trained in discipline, utterances well spoken. This is a blessing supreme. To be well caring of mother and father, looking after spouse and children, to have a harmless occupation. This is a blessing supreme. Selfless giving, living a just life, supporting relatives and blameless actions. This is a blessing supreme. To cease and abstain from evil, complete restraint from intoxicants, diligent and virtuous practices. This is a blessing supreme. To be reverent and humble, content and grateful, to hear the Dhamma at the right time. This is a blessing supreme. To be patient and obedient, visiting recluses, to discuss the Dhamma at the right time. This is the blessing supreme. To live austerely and purely, to see the noble truths and to realize Nibbana. This is the blessing supreme. A mind unshaken when touched by the worldly states, sorrowless, stainless, and secure. This is the blessing supreme. Those who have fulfilled all these are everywhere invincible. They find well-being everywhere. Theirs is the blessing supreme. Excellent, excellent, excellent. I wonder if there's any questions from the chat box. People out there in Zoom are not very chatty, it seems. What? A hand raised? Okay. Who was that? Did somebody have a question they wanted to raise their hand? Who? What? Well, you have a question? No? Just scratching your head, right? You thought you were raising your hand. Okay. Well, we have some questions here that our retreatants here in the house have written down. So we will answer those, try to answer them first. And then in the meantime, if any of you out there participating on Zoom come up with a question, then you can write it down in the chat box and we'll try to get to them afterwards. Okay? So this question is about the Brahma Viharas. Today I mentioned about the Brahma Viharas as being topics and qualities of the mind that are very good for practicing, especially in the later part of our life, in order to help prepare the mind to get rid of hatred and greed and other negative emotions, so that we can die more peacefully without a lot of this unfinished business going to affect our mind. So this question says, what percent of our meditation practice would you recommend that we dedicate to the Brahma Viharas? Now, what I do, in my own retreats normally, we usually the main Brahma Vihara that's practiced is metta, or loving friendliness. So that's the most common one of the Brahma Viharas that the people practice, because it's probably one of the easiest ones. And it's also usually the first one and the easiest one to cultivate. So one could either spend, depending on one's state of mind, let's say you've just come to sit down and you're holding some negative thoughts that you got during the day toward some persons or some news you heard and so on, that disturbed you about certain persons or types of persons. So in order to sort of cleanse the mind of these negative thoughts, doing some metta at the beginning of the meditation would be useful. Because if you don't, and you still have these kind of thoughts in your mind, then during your meditation, they will probably come up and become, the hindrances that prevent you from really being able to focus. So in those cases, especially if there's some types of things that you had accumulated during the day that would pertain to either metta or compassion or sympathetic joy. Let's say during the day you heard that one of your colleagues at work got a promotion and you didn't. And maybe you're feeling, a little bit angry about that and thinking, well, I deserve to get that promotion. Then it's not going to help for you to sit down and just try to watch your breath, because there's no way your mind is going to forget that. So that would be an example of a good time to practice the sympathetic joy of, being happy at the good fortune of others, even if it's at our own expense. So this is one of the definitions of sympathetic joy, being happy and glad for others when good things happen to them. Because it's an antidote for like jealousy and anger and so on when other people get things and we don't. So that's why sympathetic joy would be a good time. And then send metta, or both metta and sympathetic joy, in order so that your mind hopefully then would let go, or at least reduce the intensity of some of those negative thoughts, and then get back to then, trying to calm your mind by then the normal, mindfulness of breathing, taking some deep, slow breaths, and so on. So in those cases, practicing some of the Brahma Viharas, the appropriate ones to match appropriate situations, or just in general, it could be too. But the amount of time would be up to you. But I would say, however long it takes, maybe 10 minutes or so. And you could do it longer, but let's say maybe about 10 minutes. And then maybe at the end of meditation. Or if you don't do it at the beginning of meditation, let's say you didn't have any particular kind of negative thoughts, or aversion towards people, or angry, or whatever, then you could do it at the end of the meditation, just sending out metta in general. So if your mind was more or less in a good mood, and just to go into meditation, see how deep you can reach levels of mindfulness and concentration. And then when you come out at the end, as we often do, we spend the last some minutes portion of the meditation sending out metta, wishing that all beings could be free from greed, hatred, and delusion. All beings be able to be well, happy, and peaceful. All beings be able to hear the Dhamma and practice meditation, and so on, or however you're going to use these wordings, which helps to lift up your mind, and just having that. So it depends. There's no hard and fast rules. Depending on how much of these negative thoughts you have, then you might be good to spend more time doing that. But not everybody has a lot of these really negative thoughts and bad thoughts toward others. We all do to a certain extent, but they may not be all that prominent. So now here's another connected question that might be from the same person. I'm not sure, but can you explain how we can practice sympathetic joy? Is there a meditation specifics of sympathetic joy? Well, I guess we did just talk about that. Sympathetic joy probably is not a kind of a specific meditation that's many people practice, because metta and karuna, especially those two, are probably the most popular ones, and metta being the most popular one. But the sympathetic joy, as I mentioned, it means gladness, and gladness for whatever blessings that you have, but for others too, and being happy when you hear something, good fortune happening to other. Oh, that's fantastic. But a lot of times we hear good fortune happening to others, especially if we don't particularly like them. They shouldn't have got that. I hope they, we wish kind of ill things towards others, right? So especially if you have this kind of thoughts, then it's and knowing that everyone wants happiness, and when something happens to you, you know how good you feel about it. So everyone else has these feelings too. So it's it's the old adage of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So we should be glad and friendly and compassionate and kind toward others, just as we would like people to be with us also. So I would say, but probably in those examples I mentioned, if something particularly happened where you're having ill will toward a certain person, or jealousy maybe, or they won the lottery and I didn't, or, I spent, hundreds of dollars buying lottery tickets, and here this guy, the first lottery ticket in his whole life, and he wins $5 million. So naturally people are probably not going to feel all that good about it. So anyway, so these are, these are sort of the antidotes toward these negative types of feelings. So this next question. Forgiving people and asking for forgiveness to clear the mind, could it be done as a meditation practice if direct contact with the person involved is not possible? Yes, it can be done even if the person is not there, because we're kind of saying it to ourselves. But if the person is available, like if it's, people you live with, people you work with, and there's something has happened, usually people don't like to be the first to, make amends, right? When two people are, loggerheads, and they think the other person is the one who caused the problem, right? And we always like to think that we are right and the other person is the cause of our problems. But that's our ego is very clever in masking over or hiding our own sort of faults, or lessening them, and always wanting to protect its self-image. So this is also a kind of a negative state of mind of strengthening the ego. So even if somebody else, maybe you might think the other person is more at fault for an argument or some other situation than you were, but to humble the ego, be the first to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry what I said, even though, but, to mean it, just to break the ice, if the other person is not going to do it, being a Dharma practitioner, take it upon ourselves to make the first initiatives, and then you see it might help to, affect the other person where they would actually, I know I shouldn't have done that either. So at least you break the ice like that. So that can be done. But if people are not around or available like that, or even if it was, you can still do it, even if they're not there. You bring their face, you try to visualize their face, and to understand, kind of a certain situation. In fact, we may do that tonight as part of our meditation tonight. But so you can do it both ways, even if, because some people may be dead, right? Let's say you couldn't forgive your father or somebody else or friend before they died. And so, but, their spirit may still be around and they still might know what you're doing. And if you were able to do that, that would make them happy. But we do it for ourselves too, just to help release these negative thoughts from our own mind, even if the person doesn't even know we're doing it. But especially for forgiving yourself. So it's not only forgiving others, but forgiving ourselves. If you're blaming yourself for having, made some mistakes or did something, you have to forgive yourself too. but then make the determination to try not to make the same mistakes, again or over and over. So first you practice forgiveness, and then you send metta, having forgiven the other, forgiven yourself, ask for forgiveness. Then you send out metta to oneself and those persons and all beings. So that is a good kind of a way to combine some of those types of practices, the Brahma Viharas. Okay, this question, a little bit different one. The Buddha said birth is the cause of suffering. And that's what I was mentioned that this morning when the Buddha was trying to, going through the Paticca Samuppada, and he said the world has got a lot of suffering in it. What is the cause of this suffering? And then by logical reasoning and by deductive reasoning and cause and effect, he saw it's birth. Because if you weren't born, would you be suffering? So anyway, this is a question. Isn't that a glass is half empty approach? Because birth is also the cause of joy and happiness. Yes, but, to be probably truthful or honest, if you were to have a scale and ask most people, how many times they're angry or suffering from one, whether it's a physical suffering, a sickness, or other negative mental states, as opposed to the time when they're really, really, happy and so on. What would that be like? For a lot of people, it would kind of be heavy on maybe the not so happy side, especially people that are lost in, depression or very heavy types of emotions and things like that. So the Buddha didn't deny that there was joy, and happiness, but those are temporary mental states, because that joy and happiness depends on things that are themselves impermanent. And so as long as the object or the source of that joy or happiness is still there, then the joy and happiness may go on. But those causes of joy and happiness are liable to change at any time. And that happiness can turn into suffering within 1 or 2 seconds if the conditions change, right? So that's why the Buddha said, even in other Dhammapada verse, that attachment is the source of suffering. Of course, a lot of people take offense to that and say, oh, my child gives me so much happiness, or this and that. Yeah, but what happens if the child dies? Or gets kidnapped? Or gets murdered? Then you're going to suffer probably more suffering than what the joy of the child brought you. Well, maybe not. I don't know. I confess I never had a child, so I can't speak from personal experience, but from what I've observed, right? So anyway, we have to understand the deeper meaning. The Buddha said a lot of things, but again, he's talking from a deeper level of truth, so to speak, and so it's hard for the average person who's caught up in their attachments and so on, and depends on happiness and so on for their well-being and for objects of the world to give us happiness. But that's why that happiness is short-lived and it's replaced by suffering and sorrow. So, and actually about this one, I have gone down to Brazil and taught meditation retreats in Brazil to some Buddhist groups. And one time I was a Buddhist group in Sao Paulo. There was the chief pathologist of the biggest hospital in Sao Paulo. Sao Paulo is a city of 20 million people, and many tens of thousands of people a day probably die there. But she was the coroner and had to perform autopsies. And because I had been talking about, sometimes these, the Buddhist practice of, seeing corpses and stuff like that, she asked me, "You want to come down and see an autopsy?" And I had always wanted to, but never had the opportunity. And here she was a chief pathologist, and she could arrange, and let me come. So I said, "Yeah, I'm gonna go." I wanted to see my reaction to, seeing that, really seeing this blood and guts up close. And so I went. And so, she was saying, I was asking, pathologists, they have to find the cause of death, right? And she says, yeah, that's the purpose of doing an autopsy, is to try to determine the cause of death, for legal reasons and other things. So I asked her, do you always find the cause of death? And she said, well, sometimes it's a little difficult because there could be compound problems going on in that person, illnesses. And so sometimes we have to make a kind of educated guess. And then I said, well, if you can't determine the cause of death, because they have to write it on the death certificate. So if you can't determine the cause of death, you write birth. And she said, wow, that's fantastic. I never thought of that. No, I don't think they're going to accept that. So, but if you think about it, that is the cause of death. And that's why the Buddha said, attaining Nibbana and become liberated from the process from samsara and attaining the state of deathlessness, or going beyond birth and death, that is, sort of the ultimate goal of the Buddhist practice, because that's the only place where suffering cannot touch. Anyway, people are going to debate these things a lot, but so. A lot of people accuse Buddhists of being, sort of pessimistic and thinking life is just suffering. But actually, it's very realistic. Life is suffering because we have created the conditions in our mind to make us suffer. There's a difference between pain and suffering. Pain is a given in life. You can't escape pain. Even the Buddha had pains, and the other monks got sick and had lots of pains and so on. But suffering is optional because suffering is mental. So suffering is actually a mental state due to our reaction to pain, which is not getting what you want. And there's a nice formula for the Buddha's formula for suffering. And I got this from a friend of mine named Shinzen Young. He's quite a well-known Dhamma teacher too. Many of you might have heard of him. But I met him in Los Angeles in 1977 when he was a Zen monk, and he was kind of a mathematics whiz and things like that. And, we had some discussions, and in that time, the computers and stuff like that were just sort of coming out. And I think he said, he was trying to find a mathematical formula for suffering. And then he came up with one. And it's very appropriate. So the mathematical formula for suffering is P equals, S equals P times R, right? For you people who've taken algebra or mathematics. So S equals P times R. So S stands for suffering. P stands for pain. And R stands for resistance. That means resisting the pain. So keeping that in mind, let's say if you have a pain of 5 and a resistance of 5, what's your suffering? 25. And if you have a pain of 5 and a resistance of 1, what's your suffering? And if you have a pain of 5 and a resistance of 0, what is your suffering? There you go. Buddhism in a nutshell. And if that's all you could remember about the teachings of the Buddha, you could attain enlightenment. So anyway, I'm just saying that it's the resistance in the mind to whatever conditions are coming through, whether it's physical pain, mental pain, and whatever. It's our resistance, not accepting it. And resistance, actually, what is resistance? You have to think clearly about these things. What is resistance? What resists? Me. I, me, and mine. Somebody takes something, give it to me, give it to me. You're resisting that. Or you're resisting change. So if things change and you don't allow them to change, that's a kind of resistance. You're resisting the laws of nature. You're not living according to the laws of nature, which is everything is subject to change. But we're trying to hold on, even in relationships. Again, don't get me wrong, I'm just talking about a very common thing, right? So in relationships, when one person, decides they want to change and the other person is holding on and they can't accept that somebody else is going to change and want to go somewhere else, then people suffer tremendously, don't they? So that's the resistance to the laws of nature. You're living out of harmony with the laws of nature, thinking that everything should be permanent, but things are not permanent. And they're subject to change at the slightest whim and conditions. And we have to be ready to accept that. Otherwise, we suffer. Or, you find out you're going to die within 6 months. Okay, that was in the cards. That was always a possibility. Why resist it? Now, it doesn't mean you shouldn't try to seek some medical attention and maybe, try to do something. But in the long run, in many cases, there's not much we can do, and people have to eventually accept it. So the resistance is resisting pain on one hand, but attachment is also a kind of a resistance because we're not allowing that thing to change. We want to hold on to it. But, this is a little bit difficult for a lot of people to understand. That's why, the Buddhist teaching runs a little bit deeper than the ordinary types of thinking. but so does the liberation of the mind go much deeper than most, sort of Western psychologies also. So that is, I think that's the end of that question. Now, did anybody write some questions in the chat? Are these new questions? Let's go up to the first one. Oh, quite a lot here. Oh, I mentioned some links, some videos I sent to a friend who's in the process of passing away. Actually, I just sent them the link to our Lion of Wisdom YouTube channel because I didn't have time or the conditions to select any particular ones. But, all the Wednesday night talks that I've been giving for the last almost 2 years now, more than 150 years. They all have guided meditations in the last hour. And so specifically, I was saying if she could play a guided meditation or even the Dhamma talk, because this person was familiar with, came to retreats with me and liked my style of teaching. So, any one of those, I just said select one and try to play it for them. So anyway, those are all on our Lion of Wisdom YouTube channel, which are found, the link to that is on our website. So I'm sure most of you have that, our website, or just look up on the Lion of Wisdom YouTube channel. And most of those, they're all listed kind of currently and by dates and by topics. So you could select some topics, but most of the guided meditations in those are very similar and similar to the way I've even been giving some guided meditations during this retreat. I opened the phone and a lot of Black Friday sales popped up. Mind has been thinking about all the wish items that are missed. Money seems to be more serious clinging object than the 5 aggregates. Well, money is one of the 5 aggregates, by the way. What can be done to detach from money? Money can't buy you happiness. That's one way of looking at it. But money is also the 5 aggregates. It's a visible object, so it's a material vibration, and it's a feeling. Money might bring you happiness. I mean, a pleasant feeling. If you win the lottery, right? It might give you a painful feeling if you get it stolen. So there's all kinds of things connected with that. So I know it's a problem for a lot of people, and follow the middle path. You don't deny yourself everything, but know what you need, and you have to take care of a family, of course. So there's other people that you have to think about, and also these are real, very real situations, and each person has to find that middle path for themselves, how to practice Dhamma in the midst of this kind of world that's been so, conditioned to having so many things and comfort and luxuries, and people got so attached to that it's almost impossible to then get people to try to give that up or to moderate. Question. Could you please teach how to do Maharana Sati meditation for lay people? Well, Maharana Sati, that means the mindfulness of death. In the Bhavana Society chanting book, there's a whole sutra on Maharana Sati. But basically, it's kind of a recitation. It's a reflection. You're reflecting that death could come at any time from many possible sources. Just as I was explaining today, you contemplate that and know that every morning you wake up, you're a survivor. You didn't die during the night. You woke up, where a lot of people other died. So to be thankful that you lived one more day. And so, but basically it's just contemplating that reality and not taking for granted the life and learning how to deal with less. Because when you die, it's the mind that's craving all of its attachments and all of its memories. That is what is going to pull you back to birth again. So you start weaning yourself of this over-dependence on, material things, luxury, comfort, always wanting to do things and needing people and so on, and learning how to be more content with the present moment. And that is also part of that training. So that when you die, you won't have so much of that grasping in the mind. So there's no specific meditation as such. It's just basically reflecting on the fragility of life and that death could happen at any moment. That anything, there's something called the 4 Any's. Anything can happen to anybody. So anything can happen to anybody at any time, in any place. So anything to anybody at any time, in any place, anything can happen, including death. You could get sick at any time, in any place. People get sick on cruises, airplanes, when they least expect it. These things come down like a hammer so quickly, and no one can predict when they'll come. So this is also an important. And then more basically, are you ready to let go? That's the main thing. Not just contemplating death, but are you ready when you have to let go and not have regrets? That's the main really idea about contemplating the death. Now, a lot of people think death meditation is watching a corpse decompose and so on. That's really not really that. That's part of a Subha Bhavana. That's not the part of Maharana Sati. But anyway, I would recommend getting the Bhavana Society chanting book and reading those gathas and over and over again. There are some kind of contrived meditations that sometimes have given people guided meditation, but a lot of people are not really affected by that. You can imagine yourself like when you're doing anapanasati. And so you're observing each breath go in and out. Maybe the breaths will, become very faint. And then maybe deliberately try to hold your breath out. And see how long you can hold your breath out without the body convulsing or contracting, or that fear. It's the fear of dying that's going to cause you to breathe in again. So one could practice with that. And if actually, or to imagine that that last breath goes out, that no other breath would come in again. And could you accept that? Of course, that's just a contrived kind of situation because you know that the next breath is probably going to come in again. So, it's, but, there's different ways a person could contemplate that. And in Tibetan Buddhism, they have a number of ways that they also, contemplate and the death and so on. But I would say that the most important one is we contemplate death by preparing our mind to be ready when it happens and not being scared of the death. So yeah, going and seeing, dead bodies, for example, that could be a way to see what your reaction would be. Like I went to the autopsy and I saw these bodies being cut up. I'd never seen that before. And I wanted to observe my reaction. And actually, I thought it was cool. I watched this one, the guy in the autopsy room, he had an old rusty hacksaw and he was cutting the top of a skull off a dead person. And I was watching him, cut this skull in half. And at the end, there was a little wedge of skull not cut through, and he had a chisel and a hammer. And he went, "Took," and the top of the head went flying off. And I went, wow. And the brain was right there visible. And I was looking at it, and I was trying to see some reaction, but I couldn't find any negative reaction. And the guy took it out to examine it. And he said, "You want to hold it?" Yeah. And he put that brain in my hand, was probably full of electricity about 8 hours before. And I was trying to see if there's any reaction. I was just saying, okay, yeah, that's a real brain, And so anyway, so that's one thing. A lot of people, they don't like, that's why, hospitals or a lot of times families will put their old ailing parents into a nursing home because they don't want to be reminded that this kind of a thing is going to happen to them too. Or they, put people away in the nurse. And I'm not making light of that, of course, but I'm just saying that we don't like to be reminded of old age and death. So it's easier to put, the old or aging and dying parents in some institutions, not there in the house where it's a daily reminder. We can go visit them once in a while, right? But so when we see death and so on, it reminds us of our own impending death. And that's why people have aversion to wanting to see these kind of reminders, because it triggers in them that fear of death. So by being exposed to these things, that's why India is a great place. I traveled in India a lot in the 70s. And there you could see dead bodies from time to time laying out in the street or at the river bank, or seeing them burned on the cremation ghats in Benares and some other places. And so in India, it's not it's not really seen as a kind of a taboo thing like here, we put the bodies into a tuxedo and make it look really nice, like nothing happened. But that's kind of an illusion, right? And so that's part of the reason why, people have this fear of, seeing these kind of reminders. Or the other meditation on death, if you see a roadkill, you're driving along the street and you see a dead deer or fox or some animal just got killed, you should reflect, that could also happen to me. I have not gone beyond that state. In fact, those 5 recollections that I mentioned today, one of them is I have not gone beyond death. this same fate will happen to me. I have not gone beyond this. So whenever we hear that or hear that somebody died, somebody got in an auto wreck, this and that, we should, well, yeah, that could happen to me too. So hopefully it would be a reminder to be more mindful, not go out drunk driving or going into places where injuries and accidents could happen. So anyway, these are just some different ways of reflecting on that. Let's see, is there any others? The samadhi image of the Buddha is a powerful visual image for me. So my question is, can you please reflect of the mind state of samadhi for an unenlightened being. Much gratitude for your effort. Okay, can they see this Buddha here? Sure, okay. Well, I'm going to show you our altar because that will, I can explain it with a visual. How come I can't see it? Oh, because you have this. Okay, can you all see our Buddha image here? Can you bring it up close, telephoto? So this Buddha image, the Buddha is seated in the the Dhamma Chakra Mudra. You see his two hands are in the teaching mudra called the Dhamma Chakra Mudra. And I don't know, especially at night, like last night when we were doing meditation in the evening and it was dark and the Buddha image was lit up in the dark. It's very beautiful. And it exudes that wisdom. And the three fingers are important. The three fingers are like this. These three fingers stand for Anicca, Dukkha, and Anatta. The three characteristic marks of Anicca, Dukkha, and Anatta. Of course, different teachers will explain it maybe in different ways, but this is the way that I like to explain it because it has a very powerful meaning. So the Buddha is saying these three marks, all the five aggregates are subject to impermanence, the source of suffering if you cling to them or depend on them for happiness. And they're without any owner or controller, any indwelling, permanent, unchanging owner or controller. And then these two fingers form a circle. And one interpretation, it means, look within yourself to see it. Don't look outside of yourself to see it. Look inside of yourself to see it. In other words, the meditation practice. So the whole of the Buddha's teaching can be summed up really in this mudra, the Dhamma Chakra Mudra, that we look inside of ourselves to see Anicca, Dukkha, and Anatta. And that sums up the state of the Buddha's mind. And the Buddha's mind had transcended that cycle of suffering and rebirth. So, and his mind is in that vision all the time, in that state of liberation. The Buddha has that purified webcam going on continuously in his mind. And he's bubbling over with bliss. All the cells of his body are bubbling over with bliss and happiness. If you've read the definitions of the first and second jhana, he gives those nice descriptions of like being submerged in a bubble bath. Like every cell and pore of the body is bubbling in bliss saturated and suffused with the bliss that comes through the concentrated mind. And the mind's in perfect peace. So that is the state of the Buddha image, the Samadhi Buddha image. And tonight when we do meditation, when it's dark, and that Buddha image is coming out of the dark, you can look at that, and it just tells everything. And so when you look at a Buddha image, actually, you shouldn't see it as the Buddha. It's a mirror. Actually, the Buddha image should be a mirror. You're like looking in a mirror, because every being has that same wisdom and potential for liberating the mind. And so that's the way when we look at a Buddha, pay homage to a Buddha statue, we're aspiring to reach that state of, mental freedom. Okay? So. Can you bring it back to you? The relation of body feelings in an instance to the next are different states when you are totally in the moment. This thought continuation not sure if I actually understand that. But anyway, the question is this to be believed or a trick of the mind? It's probably to believe. A lot of people think these things are tricks, It's the mind can't trick us, of course. That means, like taking a coiled rope to be a snake, get scared by clinging to perceptions, or our perceptions can scare us. So it's hard to answer that question because I'd have to put my mind in your mind and try to have that exact experience to really kind of understand what exactly you're seeing there. But when we see things arise and vanish very quickly, or seeing how so many things are arising and vanishing, that's not a trick. That's seeing reality as it is. Or seeing the sense of the self, experiencing the sense of the self and the I fading away. That's not a trick. That's the reality, because the sense of self is an illusion. And a lot of people are saying, "Oh, those are tricks. Those are this." People can believe what they want, but only in meditation. You're the one that's going to ultimately have to answer those questions. Nobody else can really answer those questions for you, and it takes a lot of practice and experience in experiencing so many things, hundreds, thousands and thousands of different types of mental states. Every single meditation you have is an opportunity to see different aspects of the mind, how the mind is reacting to feelings, how it's interpreting those feelings, reacting to those feelings, and so on. And it can change at different times. It can react in different ways, same types of feelings. And it's a very complicated process, the body and mind. But this observation came when you're sitting in meditation. So it was an insight. It was trying to tell you something. An insight. You saw something in the mind you hadn't seen before, and you have to then, based on the Buddha's teaching, you say, "Oh yeah, that was right. Yeah, the Buddha said that. Things are impermanent, things are no self. Attachment leads to suffering. So that's what the Buddha said. Don't believe what you just hear or heard from somebody else, but if it matches up with the teachings and your own experience, and it seems to match up, then you can take it to be the truth, or take it to be valid. To die before you die, is that when we practice meditation and reach the level of concentration where the self is seen as illusion and no attached to objects? Well, that's not dying from when dying before you die. Oh, you could only say that when you've attained the arahantship stage. So only somebody who has attained total liberation, like the Buddha or arahants or other fully enlightened beings, that is when they could say they've died before they die. That means the ego dies before the physical body dies. So people who have attained full enlightenment, basically their ego, their sense of self has died. And they're living mostly in the state of awareness where, they can still, relate to themselves as a person and being, but they're no longer clinging to it. It has no longer any kind of real or solid kind of essence to it. And it's seen as an illusion. So, and they've died to greed, hatred, and delusion. So that sentence, "died before the die," applies only to apply in that state. But even in the stages before full enlightenment, like entering the stream and once returning and never returning, the ego is dying little by little, basically. But once you understand how actually death then is an illusion. And that's why when one really sees that, that's when you lose your fear of death. Many people have had near-death experiences, right? You read it in some news magazines, or heard people give lectures on they had a near-death experience. And they said it was the most beautiful thing they ever experienced. And they didn't want to come back. I'm not saying they reached a state of deathlessness, but they overcame their fear of death because they realized that the mind doesn't die. You can actually reach some very beautiful states, before the rebirth occurs, when the mind becomes free of the physical body. But then for some reason, these people were brought back in and into the painful body. But for those few brief moments or minutes, they were in this disembodied state, so to speak, they were totally blissed out and they lost their fear of death. And so these kind of experience, and then in meditation too, when you reach that state where the ego has been largely put into abeyance, or you have that state of entering the stream experience, or the momentary glimpse of emptiness, then also your fear of death would largely vanish also. Because most people, they don't know what's going to happen after death, or they're afraid they did a lot of bad things. They might go to someplace down there, or just poof, disappear, and then nothing. They don't. Most people are confused about it. So, but anyway, when you have these experiences, especially when you have glimpses of when that transcendence of dualistic consciousness and you experience the sort of infinity of consciousness, then that's the kind of thing. And it's so vivid and powerful, you never forget it. And that's the thing. So Woody Allen says, it's not that I'm afraid of dying, it's just that I don't want to be there when it happens. Well, listen to this. This is a little saying I heard somewhere. I forget where exactly I heard it, but it's very nice. We're talking about, being here and now, right? So if the mind is really in the here and now, that means in the present moment awareness, and it's centered in the present moment, not thinking of the past or the future. It's really, there in the midst of experiences, but having that kind of deep silence in the midst of that. So if you can practice that, so if you are here and now, you will be there then. You understand that? If you are here and now, you will be there then. So when death happens, you will be there. If you can practice being here and now in the present moment without grasping at the past, grasping for the future, or resisting the present moment, then that's what it's going to be like when you die. And you will be there at that time. Okay, so I think that might be a good place to finish this discussion. What was his last question? How about the empty house guided meditation? No? Maybe we'll fit it in tonight or tomorrow morning. Yeah, we could do it. Okay. So. Okay, so take a few minutes, do a little standing awareness to relieve any pain in your legs. Just start with taking a few deep, slow breaths. We're going to chant Namo Buddhaya. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Buddhaya. Try to maintain that connection to the sitting body. Resting the awareness behind the eyes. Feel that outline of the sitting body. With the breathing there in the middle of that body. Feeling the subtle life force vibration. Just opening up to the flow of impermanence through this body and mind. Five aggregate vibrations. Coming and going. Just turning up the power of the mental microscope. Notice, feel more and subtler. Material vibration, sound, thoughts, arising and vanishing, coming and going. That expanded present moment awareness. Just understanding that everything is just vibration. Physical vibrations, sound vibrations, mental vibrations. Even the sense of I or me as a mental vibration. It's cultivating that buffer zone. awareness between the knower and the known. Detaching from, letting go of the known. Understanding that all these five aggregate material vibrations, feelings, perception, volitional activities, ego consciousness, not me, not mine, not myself. There's no owner or controller to them. Just impersonal phenomena arise and pass away through the past conditioning and ignorance. Just empty vibrations rising, floating through, vanishing through the space of awareness. When you detach the mind from the known, letting go of the known, and also just letting go of the knower, the sense of I, me, or mine. Let that gradually fade away. Like an ice cube melting in water. Just allowing that subtle vibration of knowing awareness. Arise and fill up the mind. And just become like an empty house. Things knocking on the doors and windows. Begging for attention. But there's nobody home. There's nobody home to answer the call, knocking on the doors and windows. All thoughts of the past or future vanish. Just the vibrations of the nervous system. Just dying to the past and the future. If you can maintain that state of awareness at the time of death. That is dying with awareness. Apamando amata padam pamado machuno padam apamadi namiyanti ye pamatayata mata Itam visesato nyatava appamadam hipandita appamati namiyanti Ariyanam Gochari Rata. Mindfulness is the path to the deathless. Unmindfulness is the path to death. The mindful do not die. The unmindful are as if dead already. So understanding this excellence of mindfulness, the wise person dwells therein, enjoying the bliss beyond birth and death. And thus spoke the Buddha. Okay, friends, those who are tuned in over Zoom, brings our evening meditation to an end. Whatever peace of mind, silent awareness you might have gotten in the meditations, try to keep that with you as you take your rest for this evening. Try not to get caught up in some other activities and lose that state of awareness. See you tomorrow morning for the last program.